Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Okay, let's get right into this. Today, we're decoding a universal rule. It's this fascinating, hidden pattern that allows you to quite literally achieve way more by working way less. We're talking about a concept that shows up everywhere, from the plants in your garden to the entire global economy.
So let me ask you this. What if 80% of your results came from just 20% of your efforts? I know, it sounds kind of like a gimmick, right? Like some trendy internet productivity hack. But trust me, it's not. We're actually talking about a fundamental reality of how systems naturally organize themselves. And once you see it, you really cannot unsee it.
All right, let's get into section 1, the hidden universal pattern. This is exactly where the whole idea began. Way back in 1896, there was this Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. He was studying wealth distribution, and he stumbled onto a pretty startling discovery. A staggering 80% of the land and wealth in Italy was owned by an incredibly tiny fraction of the population, just 20%. Now, at first, Pareto just figured this massive imbalance was a unique economic quirk of the time.
But then, Pareto went out for a walk in his garden, and he noticed something that absolutely blew his mind. He was looking at his pea plants, and he realized the exact same ratio was happening right there in the dirt. 80% of the peas were coming from just 20% of the pods. That was the real aha moment. This wasn't just human economics, this was nature itself. A natural recurring phenomena, literally a universal pattern.
Which brings us to section 2, power laws versus bell curves. Let's look at the mathematical reality behind all of this.
You know, as a society, we are basically trained to expect a normal distribution, the classic bell curve. We just naturally assume a linear relationship where average effort equals average results. But here's the secret. The 80-20 rule reveals that reality actually operates on a power law distribution. In a power law, a tiny handful of elements completely dominate the system, which creates wildly asymmetrical inputs and outputs.
Just think about it. Wealth distribution, the sizes of our cities, the frequency of words we use in everyday language, and even the magnitudes of earthquakes, none of these follow a neat, even bell curve. No way. They are all dictated by power laws. A few massive cities totally dominate global populations. A few common words make up almost all of our conversations. A few massive earthquakes release the vast majority of seismic energy. It's everywhere.
Moving right along to section 3, the rule at scale. Let's see how this plays out in massive modern applications. When you start looking at the numbers, the rhythm of these statistics is just staggering. Check this out. 20% of customers generate 80% of the revenue. 20% of software bugs cause 80% of system crashes. 20% of the roads carry 80% of the traffic. And, yep, 20% of your exercises produce 80% of your fitness gains. Tech giants like Spotify, they know for a fact that 20% of their songs account for 80% of total streams. Amazon knows that just 20% of their products drive 80% of their massive revenue. While the exact 80-20 ratio might fluctuate slightly, the underlying pattern, it's absolute.
If you want hard enterprise proof, just look at Microsoft. They realized that if they focus purely on fixing their top 20% most reported bugs, it completely eliminated 80% of related software crashes. Talk about efficiency, right? Toyota's legendary lean manufacturing system works exactly the same way. By identifying the critical 20% of defect sources, their overall manufacturing defects just plummeted. They don't waste time trying to fix everything all at once. They just target the vital few.
So here's the really crucial point, the inversion of the rule. 80% of your problems are coming from just 20% of your sources. Think about the friction in your own work or your own systems right now. Identifying that specific 20% causing the headache and wiping it out, that is literally the highest leverage move you can possibly make.
Okay, let's get personal. Section 4, hacking your personal life. Here is how you can weaponize this pattern for yourself.
Consider this idea for a second. The first 20% of effort yields 80% of the results, partly because of diminishing marginal returns. This right here is the absolute secret to learning and achieving faster. Going from absolute 0 to 20% competence in a brand new skill gives you massive, immediate practical value. But grinding away from 80 to 100% perfection, that takes vast amounts of time for incredibly tiny gains.
So how do we actually apply this day to day? Well, first off, audit your daily tasks to find that 20% that actually moves the needle, and ruthlessly delegate or eliminate the rest. Second, when tackling a new field, identify the critical 20% of the concepts first, so you reach functional competence at lightning speed. And third, this is a big one, relationships.
Invest intentionally in the 20% of your relationships that are providing 80% of your happiness, support, and opportunities.
But wait, there's a catch. Let's look at Section 5, Nuances and the Long Tail, because there is a pretty major exception.
See, for decades, physical retail completely relied on the 80-20 rule. Because shelf space was so limited, stores only stocked the top 20% of hit products. But then Chris Anderson introduced a theory called the long tail. Streaming services like Netflix have infinite digital shelf space. Sure, they still make money on big hits, but they pull in massive profits from the obscure 80%, the long tail, simply because the cost of digital distribution is basically zero.
Also, a quick warning here. Beware of false 80-20 thinking. Remember, this principle describes patterns. It is not a blind prescription for literally everything. You should never eliminate low-value activities if they are essential maintenance. Like, you can't exactly 80-20 brushing your teeth, right? Or basic relationship maintenance. Neglecting that supposedly low-value 80% in those areas can have disastrous downsides.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, the recursive rule and the challenge. Get ready to see what happens when you apply the rule to itself.
Just 4%. Get this, the 80-20 rule is actually recursive. If you take your most productive 20% of effort and then you apply the 80-20 rule to that specific chunk, you isolate an incredibly tiny 4% of your total effort. And that magical 4%, that is driving roughly 64%, the vast majority of your overall outcomes. Find that 4% and you have found your absolute highest leverage point.
So here is your immediate challenge. Number 1, write down your top 10 work tasks for today. Number 2, circle the 2 tasks that produce the most undeniable results. Number 3, block 80% of your focus time for those 2 tasks alone. Seriously, try this for just 1 week and watch what happens to your productivity. It's a total game changer. But before you go, ask yourself this. If you could isolate the 4% of your life that brings you the absolute most joy, what would you have to let go of to live there full time? Think about it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time.